Hey everyone, thanks again for joining the podcast. Today I have a really special guest for you, Riessa Monique. She is a really good friend of mine who I met through a human design coaching workshop. And during this time together, Riessa and I started doing something called listening partnerships. And this was where we were paired up by our coach and we did deep listening with each other. So throughout that time, and after our coaching container ended, Raisa and I continued to do these, and we would meet every couple of weeks and just talk to each other for like an hour. And so, what we're going to do today is just kind of a pop-up podcast. I'm going to let Raisa introduce herself to you, tell her about herself and what she does, and then we'll go from there and just see what comes out of our conversation. So, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hi, so I am Riessa Monique, like Allison said, and I am a life coach for women in tech. I help stressed out women in tech reduce their stress while staying in their career, as well as increasing their confidence.
I love that. So, I don't know a lot about tech. So
hmm
you say you help women in tech. Like,
hmm
what is that?
That
Who?
just means that the technology industry. So I graduated as an engineer. I went into telecommunications, ended up in tech, and both of them are male dominated industries. So literally being the only woman in the room. And so because I've worked with other women in those similar situations, I understand some of their pain points not being heard and things of that nature, and also the amount of pressure they put on themselves. So yeah. That's specifically why I help them.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who experience working in male-dominated fields and
Yeah.
would totally resonate with what you do and who you help. Okay, so I want to swing back to our conversations and how those have really helped us. So listening partnerships. This is something that we learned from Melanie Hill in our human
hmm
coaching, where
Yeah.
we sit literally. Now, this is weird for people because, like, even at me as a coach, I felt pretty good about it because I'm really good at like holding space for people. But how did you feel? Like, didn't you think it was really weird to just sit there and just listen to somebody talk for like 30 minutes
Yeah.
and
So
not interrupt and not offer advice and not do anything?
I thought it was dumb. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, we're supposed to do this. I'll try it one time just to see how
Yeah.
it is. But this is so dumb. And I think we were speaking like 15 minutes apiece. There's no way I must talk for 15 minutes. This is going to be so stupid. Yep, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I remember that too because I actually got a little bit of anxiety over it because I was like, I didn't think that I was going to have trouble listening to somebody talk. I was like you. I was like, I'm not going to have enough to talk about for 15
Mm-hmm.
minutes. What am I going to talk about? And I don't even know this person, and
Right.
I'm going to have to like open up to them and like, what if I cry or what if I like say something stupid? But it was such a magical experience, I felt like, because it what happened for me, and I think you probably would agree with this, is that during the talking part, during the time that I was just, and I remember even saying this to you, I don't have anything to talk about today. And then like 20 minutes later,
Yeah.
I had like released all this stuff out. So it's like you have the space to just get it all out, and then your mind with your words just sort of take you wherever you need to go. I don't know. Like, what did you think about that?
Oh yeah, I would absolutely. But you're so funny because more than one time you're like, oh, I don't have really much to say. 15 minutes later.
Yeah, it was so like it was really cathartic
Mhm.
actually, and being a coach, you often, and you know this, you often spend a lot of time listening to other people and the issues and things that they're struggling with. So you aren't really the one that's, unless you have a coach yourself, unless you are, have somebody that is actively coaching you. So it was really, really a great experience. And I don't know how I would have ever entered into that without being in Melanie's program because it's not something that you could even just like call your friend and be like, hey, I just need to talk for 15 minutes. Can you just listen to me? Don't judge me. Don't offer advice. Don't interrupt me. Don't say anything.
Yeah. They're like, okay, why'd you call me? Just talk to the wall. That's what you're
Exactly.
asking.
Exactly. But it does make a difference having that human person to like nod and to just, be there with you and express their, even nonverbal, right? Express their empathy or their understanding and just hold that space. So, that is, there was a lot of magic in that. And I really, really valued that. And I'm super excited because we have developed a friendship beyond that because we were like, this is so great. We just need to keep doing it.
Hmm.
So we learn from each other every couple of weeks that when we meet. Now, before Raíssa and I started recording today, we did a little bit of this already and we were chatting and she was updating me on what's going on in her world. I was updating her what's going on in my world. And a thing that we were talking about was parts work and how, and if you've never done parts work, and this is new to you, this is really interesting stuff. And you don't have to do it with a partner. You can even just do it on your own. But during the course of our time together, Race and I figured out that there are lots and lots of parts within us each, and how we can actually use those parts to develop our skills, to shift how we feel, and be better overall. So one of my parts that I wanted to share, and I'll let you share a couple of yours. I have a part of me who I would call Blue Ribbon Allison. Actually, Raissa named this one for me because I didn't have a name. Raissa loves the names. She's good at the names. But Blue Ribbon Allison was this little girl version of me who always wanted people to recognize her, always needed outside external validation, affirmation, stuff like that. So, going back and visiting that little Blue Ribbon Allison was really, really key to help me heal. I also had like a screaming toddler in the back seat of my car that was like, I didn't know what to call her, like whiny Allison, who was always like pressuring me to do things and get things done faster. So those were two of the ones that I had. Do you want to share a couple of the ones that you had?
Let me see. There's so many. So, like in the parts of us, it's like different parts of us or different versions of ourselves that existed, whether or not it was a time period or a moment. Um, like I have so many, like literally. It's funny, I named yours, but I don't necessarily name mine just because they're with me. I'm
Mhm.
like, there's versions of me that was a teenager, it's 12 years old, and just it's interesting to see sometimes how I feel. I'm like, how old do I think that version of Raisa is? Oh, yeah, she's probably like 12,
Mhm.
right? Just by the way I respond or the way I feel in the moment. Oh, I hate you.
Yeah.
Um,
Is that what you would do is you would go back to the time period? Because when we were talking before,
mhm,
I was struggling with a thing about being consistent. And
mhm.
as we were talking, I was like, oh, I just like this word consistency, like I don't even like it. And you said, well, what age were you when you felt like you were being judged for being inconsistent? And it was during my marriage. So
Right, yeah.
how you normally do that is just kind of go back
Yeah.
to the time of the age that you were to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like ask myself like and if I can't come with an age like is this toddler Raisa, is this preteen Raisa, is this teenage Raisa, is this 20-year-old Raisa, to get a certain time frame. And what that does, it helps me, just like when we were talking and you said like it's a problem if you're not consistent. And when did you have that? Or how old were you when someone told you that not being consistent in your life was a problem? And then that's when you mentioned, oh, 20 years of my marriage. That's when I was told.
Yeah, you're so inconsistent and you need to be more consistent. And so it's this belief system that I have created or that was programmed into me or conditioned.
Yep.
Consistency is good and inconsistency is bad, right?
Right.
And so
Yep.
it's like challenging this and going back to like the time period that was so prevalent.
Hmm.
There was a lot of shame and embarrassment when I was not being consistent, quote unquote consistent. And that was not at a specific age, but it was a specific time period. It
Right.
was from like 20 to, 38 of my
Right.
life. So I think that could probably help people when you are experiencing or feeling something that you're like struggling with to pinpoint a time in your life or an age that you might have been experiencing that and figure out like, well, what what was happening then? What does that voice sound like? How would you describe this part of you to try to work through that?
Yeah, because a lot of it has to do with, I mean, when we're born, we're not programmed with all of this. This
Mhm,
happens through our programming, through socialization, from family, from our experiences.
mhm,
So if we can look at that part of ourselves with some sort of compassion and without judgment,
mhm.
because a lot of times we have internal dialogue, and it sounds horrible. Like if anyone ever talked to us like that, we'd probably punch them in the face. But if we can just like look at that part of ourselves with whatever part that is, with love and compassion and say, oh, this kind of makes sense, right? As far as how we respond. Like, oh, of course, I was 5 years old where I actually learned this. Of course, I respond that way.
Yeah.
And also being in tech, I worked with some very immature men who grown 50 plus and will have tantrums in meetings, like yell, walk out, all kind of things. But it's like, wow, he's like acting like he's 5 years old in this moment, right? But it's like that part of him that is reacting that way. It's also it don't yeah, so it's always very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I've experienced grown men acting like that too. And it's like,
Mhm.
if if we can look at it from a different perspective and a different angle, like you
Mhm.
can have more compassion for yourself, you can have more compassion for others. Not saying we have to condone that kind of behavior,
Exactly.
but you can be like, oh, what little part of you didn't get
Hmm.
your way when you were a kid, or
Exactly.
somebody stood up to you and you didn't like it, and now you have to act out and stomp your feet and have a little tantrum, right?
Right.
But these are things that obviously we can't change in others, but we can look at introspectively to ourselves and say, like for instance, my blue ribbon Allison, I remember being this like 6, 7, 8-year-old school age, like new school age kid.
Hmm.
And because of how I grew up and my parents both working and very busy, like my mom worked nights, my dad worked early morning. So they were really never together. And I didn't see my mom a whole lot. So whenever I got an award from school, I got a blue ribbon, I got like an art recognition, anything that happened like that, people came. My mom
Hmm.
would make sure she was there. My dad would make sure he was there. Like everybody came, everybody was there to celebrate. So it was like, oh, I learned really early on that I need to do this because that's how I get my recognition. That's how I
Yep.
get people to notice me. So then I was constantly trying to achieve that my whole life.
And not only that, based on what you just said, not only do you get recognized, you actually get your parents together.
Huh? Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? More than
Because they
anything, you
weren't.
said exactly.
Yeah,
But if I get a blue ribbon, then they'll be together,
exactly. They'll
right?
show up
Like,
at the little event at school together. Yeah, and they
yeah,
all did.
no, I
Yeah.
mean, think about that as a kid. How do I see my parents together? Because if you didn't have a blue ribbon, you wouldn't see them together. Like, that's heavy.
Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure.
no wonder you're like, blue ribbons. I just
Yeah,
need
all
a
the
blue ribbon.
way. Well, it was funny the other day because I have like, we moved from our old house to our new house, and I went downstairs and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many boxes down here. And like, I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to like mementos and
Hmm.
like old pictures and like things that hold like like an emotional charge for me. And I went through this box and there was like art that I had done, there was old drawings that I had done, and there was a lot of blue ribbons and a lot of like A+ report cards and stuff. And I literally took them, put them in another box, and took them to the dumpster. I'm like, why do I need to have these? Like, why do I need
Hmm.
to be here? When I die, like, am I going to give these to my kids and are they going to be like, oh, wow, look at all the blue ribbons mom had when she was a little girl? Like, what are they going to do with it? Like, they're not being displayed. They're not, they're just taking up space in the basement. So that was a little bit of a clearing for me. And it
Wow.
actually was hard in the moment to like actually like think, well, what if I want to look at these one day? Or what if I want to go back
Hmm.
to it? And it's like, I know what I accomplished already, right?
Hmm.
That's already passed. And that was years ago. So put them in the box, took it out to the dumpster.
Well, that's a lot of growth for you, right?
Yeah.
Because you've had these for a while for a reason.
Mhm.
And so
Yep.
now you feel comfortable enough that
Yep.
you are the blue ribbon, right? You don't
Yep.
have a blue ribbon.
No, I was able to clear it out. It
Yep.
didn't have that kind of charge
Yep.
anymore,
Hmm.
or like I had to hold on to it, or like,
Right.
something like that. So I've worked on these things and, and I know you have too. It was really eye-opening when we were talking about these things because you telling somebody about the things that you're struggling with or issues that you're having or whatever helps you see that you have these kinds of parts and you don't realize that you have them sometimes. Like when you were like, oh, your little blue, I remember bursting out laughing when you said that because I was like, oh my gosh, that is like the perfect description of who that little part of me was. And I was still carrying her like
Mm-hmm.
everywhere I went. And it was like, not to say that that little part of me didn't serve a purpose because it certainly did, but I'm 44 years old now. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't see that part kind of driving the show anymore for me.
No, exactly. And it doesn't mean she's gone. And if she shows up, just show her attention and capacity. What is it she needs? Because
Exactly.
sometimes like that's the part of us sometimes like we'll be older, we're older and we're like, I don't understand why I keep doing this or I'm not doing that. And it's literally that part to your point that's in the driver's seat because we logically don't understand this. I know I should or shouldn't be doing this, but I keep doing it over and over again. And it's because that little part who we haven't recognized, showed attention to, is literally driving us.
Yeah, and I remember the time when I was really struggling with this like backseat whiny baby that I felt like kept saying, hurry up and you need to do this and you need to get more done and you need to have
Mhm.
more clients and you need to help more people. Like it was this like constant like nagging. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, like it was so exhausting.
Mhm.
And I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was like, well, what does that little girl need to hear? Like, what does
Mhm.
she need to hear? And I remember thinking, like, she needs to hear that I got this. Like,
Mhm.
I'm in control. I know what I'm doing. I can handle this, right? I don't need the peanut gallery screaming in my ear. Like, I know things need to be done, and it's not going to help me to have this noise in the background. I think maybe part of me felt like that having that noise was motivating me or
Mhm.
pushing me in some way, right? But I didn't actually need that. Like I already knew how to do it, and it actually made things way easier when I could calm that voice
Mhm.
and let that little version of me know, like, it's okay. Like,
Mhm.
I know you're anxious, but like, I can handle this and I can take care of this, and you can just be in the back seat along for the ride. Here's a lollipop, and let's go.
And that may have worked at one point, right? Where that little screaming, a little Allison in the back may have actually worked because you needed that urgency for whatever reason. But to your point, recognizing it's like, okay, I'm good now, and showing her the attention she needs. And I'm sure, like, when you're like, I got it, she's like, oh, okay, I don't have to scream anymore.
Exactly. It was like she didn't trust me. I didn't trust myself. Like literally
Exactly.
happening there. And then when I realized, wait a second, I can handle this. I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown adult. Like I am fully capable of doing all this stuff and I don't need this background noise, then
Mhm.
it just released so much of that pressure and it just felt so much better.
Yeah,
So
because no one teaches us when we're growing up how our brains work, the different parts of us. So we have no idea of what we're actually experiencing.
yeah, I find this to be just another wonderful tool that we can use when we're trying to work on ourselves, when we're trying to like dig into like self-discovery and self-development and things like
Mhm.
that. And I've used this stuff with my clients too when I sense intuitively that this kind of thing is coming up for
Yeah.
somebody. It's like, okay, well, at what point or stage in your life did this voice come up and, how old were you and what was happening and what was going on and what did it look like and feel like and what does that little different other version of you need to hear today?
Hmm.
So I find it to be just one of those things that's really, really powerful that can really help a lot.
And especially if you're working, just recognizing those parts. And that's why, as far as like working with someone else,
Mhm.
actually helps that because they'll bring attention to it. Because you're with those parts all the time, you may not notice. But as far as continuing to work with a coach, then you'll start to learn that stuff outside of your coaching session. So you can do that on your own.
Yeah, I think about like I've identified a couple, but I'm
Hmm.
sure there's a lot more. And you know what really is interesting? Oh, I never thought about this, but The other day I was on a coaching call and like a bunch of coaches were coaching in this group and they were talking about going back to your like origin wound, like an initial, like as far back as you can remember, like your very first wound. And I'd never done that before. And I'm just like going along and like writing the stuff down. And one of the things that came up for me was being about 3 or 4 years old on the beach
Mm-hmm.
and my mom sitting in a lawn chair. My dad was in the ocean. And these, like, as the wave was coming up, I don't know what they're called, like sand crabs or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, they dig down into the ground or into the sand. And I was really little and I was freaking out. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was literally in like hysterics because of these bugs or crabs or whatever they were in the ground. And they were harmless, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
My mom on her chair, I was like wanting to get up on the chair with her to get off the sand, and she was really ignoring me and talking to my aunt. And like immediately, I started thinking about nobody wants to hear my voice. I am too dramatic. My emotions don't matter. I'm being, you know, overly sensitive. Like those were the things like I couldn't have put that together at that 3-year old version
Mm-hmm.
of me. But what I realized was that I stuffed a part of me, that part was the part that was screaming, the part
Mm-hmm.
that needed that voice heard, the part that was able to say what she needed and wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and then realized at some point, oh, I actually have to smother this part. So that part actually I let come out. I
Mm-hmm.
recently allowed that part of me to
Mm-hmm.
reemerge because I had shoved down my voice, and because I had learned through the programming that like at that very young age, just not that anybody ever said those things to me. It
Yeah.
was what I automatically learned from that event in my time.
And I'm just even hearing that, if I had to guess, that wasn't the first time you experienced that,
Oh,
right?
probably not.
Right? That's just one that you can recall
That's
that that's
November.
and that's the thing as far as like just because you can't as a child verbally express it doesn't mean your body didn't experience it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I can remember the details. I can remember like I remember, like a 3-year old, how little you are, like being
Hmm.
very close, like height wise
Right.
to my mother's legs,
Hmm.
like because she was on the chair, like I was a little higher than that, but I was, as a 44-year-old person, my perspective would be much higher looking down, but the perspective was her legs were so much closer to my line of eyesight because I was so tiny.
Hmm.
And like just remember the terror, the absolute terror. And like as my mom, she's probably sitting there thinking, these things are harmless. What's the big deal? She's freaking out for nothing. Like she'll be fine. Like I'm not blaming my mom, but in my little world, it was like I was gonna get eaten and swallowed up by all these bugs in the sand. And what my reaction happened to be at that point was absolutely irrelevant.
No, it reminds me, I heard a story that this mom brought her son or daughter, a little child, to like Macy's and they were all decorated for Christmas. And like the child was so scared and having a problem. And it wasn't until the mother like actually bent down to tie the child's shoe that she got on her eye level. And she was like, "Oh, it is scary down here."
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all the perception. Like to your point, like those crabs they were really small in comparison to your mother, but they're not as small in comparison to you. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not having that perspective, like, oh, it is scary down here. And like the big giant of a parent, help, help, and your cries go unanswered.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's so like we don't think about those things like even as parents. I mean, I have 3 kids and I go back and I think about, things that they've struggled with. And it's like you do have to try to put yourself back in their shoes or at least, see things a little bit differently because the eyes of a 3-year-old are very different from the eyes of a 10-year-old are very different from the eyes of a 20-year-old, right? Like everything is going to look differently and they're going to experience the world differently. And that stuff shapes us. And, unfortunately for me at that age, it was basically your voice doesn't deserve to be heard and you need to be quiet and nobody really wants to deal with your dramatics. And I think about how differently that program would have been if I was scooped up. Oh my gosh, let's look at these. What are they? Can they hurt us? Are they
Mhm.
bad? Like what do they look like? Or whatever, right?
Mhm.
If that had happened to me, and like it's okay, like you can be scared, like because you've never seen these things before.
Mhm.
Like had I been treated in that way, right? How much differently I may have changed that part of me, or that part of me would have felt safer to react when things weren't okay, or things were scary or whatever. So, yeah, it's just really interesting when you actually start unpacking some of this stuff and looking back at your life and the timelines and the things that you've been through.
Yeah, my favorite one of my favorite verbs is like reparent because I think we are the best ones to do that because regardless of how good the parent is, they only know what they know. And so I know what every version of me needed. Do you know what I mean? When I start unpacking it, what did little Raisa need at 5, at 6, at 7, at 14, at 22, right? And I'm able to give her that stuff now, right? Whereas like our parents are just doing the best that they can at the with what they have or what they know.
Mhm.
But yeah, actually I love doing that. Like because I mean like right when I was a little kid, I couldn't articulate to my mother what I needed.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? So like my parents got divorced at a young age. My mother was like, "Oh, they look fine, so they must be okay." Right? But it did impact me. But I didn't know how to articulate like tell me what's going on. What? I don't have the word. Like I literally did not have the words or the vocabulary or I don't know if I was necessarily in touch with myself enough to even articulate or even tie them to
yeah,
each other.
yeah,
But now I can have those like conversations with like oh, so that's what little Raíz that's what her experience
yeah,
was of whatever the
yeah.
situation is.
Now, when you do that kind of
Mhm.
thing, do you do it out loud? Do you do it on paper? Do you do it like just when you're like taking a walk or in the shower? Like, how do you reparent and process? Like, when you're like, wait a second, what did that little version of me want to say?
Mhm.
And now I have the vocabulary to say it. And what would the reparenting look like? How do you actually do that for yourself?
So initially, it was all on paper, and the reason it was I needed to slow down my brain enough in order to get things out. Because sometimes it can be uncomfortable. So it's like squirrel, like you know what I mean? I'm looking at everything else where it's like literally having um writing down okay what was little Raisa experiencing and like it's almost as if I passed her the mic like
Hmm.
you know what I mean like almost like I'm down to her eye level and I'm like baby girl what happened
Mm-hmm.
and then just like allowing myself to hear myself
Yeah.
right like going back to the listening partnership real quick, one of my favorite benefits of the listening partnership and just allowing myself to speak for 15 minutes, that was so liberating because I didn't, in going through that exercise, I did not realize how much I didn't allow myself just to talk without like critiquing it. Okay, hurry up. Now get to the point now. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff, like, no, just speak as freely. Like I even had this person I would talk to, and it was just literally so I could talk out loud, but to someone else. Whereas like with the listening partnership, like I was like, I talk to who I want to, but I also allow myself the time and the space to talk as long as I want without the judgment. Is this a good idea? Is that stupid? Is that like it's not, it's like, no,
Yeah.
just say all the things.
I
What
remember
is it you say?
one thing I that stands out to me whenever we would have our talks and you would be talking and I'm just listening is you would ask yourself a question and then you would answer it. Like you would say like, well, why do I want to do that in my business? And you're like, oh, I know why I want to do that. And then like you would so like it really like I didn't even have to say anything. I could literally just
Hmm.
be there and hear your brain work. I'm like listening to your brain's processing out loud. And then you end up coming up with your answers or your decisions or your
Hmm.
ideas or, oh, I think I want to do that now, like right just out of the blue. And I don't
Hmm.
think most people really give themselves either enough space to like write out their thoughts. Maybe some people journal, but there is a difference in journaling and like verbalizing it, like you said, in a space where there's no judgment. Because think about it. you talk to you want to call one of your friends up right now and you want to say to them like, hey, I have something I want to tell you. You want to talk? And you know this person and you're really comfortable with them and maybe they're not very judgy, but like maybe they interrupt you and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, and they want to talk about their day or they think of something that reminds them about what you said and now you're down a different rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So like just, I don't know, just like having that freedom and space to really hear yourself think, I think is the big thing. You're just listening to yourself think out loud.
Yeah, so going back to the reparenting, I started with the paper just because I needed the time and the focus. So now I'm able to do that like either out
Mentally.
loud or even in my head. I think I probably did out loud first because rather than mentally. Um, and the reason is for me to again, continue to get used to like give myself or that part of me that time and that space rather than because I can think about a whole bunch of different things, like, you know what I mean? So many conversations at one time, whereas it's out loud. I'm just like, okay, baby girl, this is your, what do you need? What
Mm-hmm.
happened?
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
Yeah. It's funny too, because like, I don't know, this just popped into my head, but like, um, sometimes when I'm out and about and I see little kids that are like 2, 3 years old,
hmm
like in their yard, if I'm on a walk or at the grocery store in the little cart, and if they look at me and their parents aren't looking at me, I always turn and like smile and wave at them. And I'm
hmm
always like, oh my gosh, like I used to be that
hmm
little of a person.
Yep.
I used to experience the world on such a different level
hmm
and get programmed, just like these little kids are getting programmed.
Yep.
Like, and it's just mind blowing to me because now, 44 years old,
hmm
and I'm trying to decondition all these old programs and get that garbage out of the way so that I
hmm
can just be the me I was meant to be.
Yeah.
And it's happening to everyone. Like every single person on this planet is programmed, just like you said earlier.
Oh
Like
yeah, 100%.
society, religion, and parents, and everything.
Or even things that we made up from the standpoint, it's not safe for me to do XYZ. It's not
Right,
safe for me to get a B and I have to get A's or
right.
whatever it is. It's not safe for me to not make my bed or
Yeah,
whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah. We're just making meaning out of
Yes.
whatever situations that we've experienced to say this isn't okay, this is not safe.
Ex
And now we have this like system of beliefs about us.
exactly. And they're not really questioned. And that's one thing I love about this season of my life, as far as like questioning everything. Like, well, I've actually always believed this, but do I still believe it?
Mm.
Like, questioning things.
Ah,
And that has been so empowering for me because like you mentioned as being a kid, it's not like I was choosing what to believe, right? It was kind of being fed to me or I'm making meanings of things. It wasn't really conscious. Where
yeah,
it's now it's like, wow, do I want to believe that?
yeah. I've done that too. It's really weird when when it happens to you too, and you start to challenge these things. You're like, whoa, like I've always believed this my whole life, but is
Yeah.
this actually,
Yeah.
is this from me or is
You're
this
right.
from somebody else?
Yep.
Do I want to keep believing it? And if you do, great. If you don't, but like, it's just about actually having that conversation with yourself and being able to choose. Like, you get to choose, you get to
Right.
decide. You don't have to believe it just because everybody else told you this is the
Right.
way.
And that's probably something you help your clients with, right? As
Mhm.
far as their choice and even in their relationships,
Yeah.
right? You're
100%.
supposed to stay, you're supposed to put up with it because everyone else says you should.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not even just about that, but like really challenging all the thinking that, you know, are keeping them stuck, that are
Yeah,
keeping them feeling like they can't move forward or they can't stop thinking about this or that, their ex is living their best life and they're in this desolate, dark place. And though often these things feel real and they feel like a reality, well, the reality is your brain doesn't know the difference between an imagination and a real thing. So
yeah,
whatever you're feeding it, it thinks it's real. If you're
right.
thinking about it, it thinks it's real. So it's going to have that same physical response in your body. Just like if you watch a scary movie and you get scared, it's not real, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're still going to experience fear or the rapid heart rate or physical experiences the same way that you would if it were really happening. I mean, probably not to the same level. You were right, of course, because if you're being chased by like a axe murder or something, like it's going to be a lot worse than watching it on TV, but you're still experiencing on a physical level. So there's what you're saying is absolutely true. It's just a matter of starting to deconstruct all of the old ways that we've been taught to believe about ourselves and our worth and what we make it mean about others' behavior about us and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Tell everybody one thing about you that not a lot of people know.
Oh my gosh. The hardest questions about me are questions about myself. Um, what don't people know about
I
me?
mean, this could be like people in your family know, but like maybe like other people don't know.
Yeah, I know that's it, it's not even so it's really just it's just really a hard question for me because I'm like, I don't know. Like it's just really a challenge for me.
Well, I know
Um,
this about you, but maybe some people do know this about your
what?
dancing.
My dancing? Oh
Like,
yeah, I like to dance. I'm currently taking, I don't know how to say it. It's a Vietnamese martial arts, so that's fun. Let's
hmm,
see, what else? I'm very silly. And I will be 99 and I'm still gonna be silly. Let's see, what else?
me too. I get called cringe all the time by my kids, so
Oh, you're doing things right.
I know. I'm embarrassing them and I love it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else? What don't people know about me? I guess the reason why that question's hard for me because I know everything. So I'm like, what is the thing? What
Yes.
don't people
People
know?
really do have struggles with this. Some people do.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those. Because I'm like,
Well, I mean, the one thing I didn't know when and you actually said this at the beginning of our call was that you're was an engineer.
yeah, I went to Georgia Tech
Yeah.
and I have an engineering
I was
degree.
like, what?
No, so that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm like, oh, that, let me see. I mean, like, yeah, I don't feel like I don't really know. I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, well, when you think of it, you can let me know and I'll put it in the show notes. I'm always trying to
Uh,
find out new things about everybody, okay?
let me see.
You're an open book anyway, so
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel that way. Like, honestly, I do feel that way. I feel like I'm an open book for anyone who's interested in reading,
yeah.
right? And I don't think everyone's interested in reading. So therefore, you're like,
Oh,
oh, I don't know anything about you. Really?
great.
Pay attention. You can know everything.
Well, you are in process of creating a podcast, right?
Oh yes, I that is new. Cause so that's what I was thinking. I was going like towards the future. Like, what are the things that people don't know? It's like all future stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm in process of creating starting a new podcast called Inside and Outside the Code. I actually have the image all made up. Like the inside, it has code on top of it. The outside has code that doesn't have code on top of it. It's like the matrix type code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's really cool. So what's it going to be about?
yeah, it's just like really to help stressed out women in tech.
Hmm.
One, to normalize their experiences and know that they have the answers to actually change those. Like we were just talking about, like we're literally just not taught a lot of things. It's not to say that information isn't out there, it's just what we were programmed to believe.
Yeah.
And it's like helping them with that.
And how like just perfect that it's about inside and outside the code. And we're talking about the things that we're programmed with.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really,
Exactly. So even programming doesn't, that's not just a tech
uh-huh.
things in the technology industry.
Yeah.
Like, the, yeah, we're always being programmed.
So tell everybody where they can connect with you if they want to follow
Okay.
you or find you.
Okay, so I am on Instagram, so at Riessa Monique, Riessa Monique, all one word. And depending on when this comes out, it might be some podcast episodes. So inside and outside the code.
Okay, so I will put your information in the show notes, and then I'll also, if your podcast is ready to go by then, put that in the show notes so that
Okay.
people can come find it and listen. And then if you know women in tech, which actually I do, one of my clients right now is a woman in tech. So
See?
I'll send her over to your podcast so she can listen to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, she works in a school, like a university, with like technology, programming, stuff like that. And there's a lot of men, and it's
Hmm.
extremely difficult for her. So we're working on reprogramming all that stuff to help her so that she can process and deal with things a little bit easier in that
Yeah,
environment.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's
She
definitely a
can't get
lot.
out of it. Like that's her role. Like she can't just leave the environment, right? So like when you're in a
Hmm.
personally abusive relationship, you can escape and get out, right? Well, this is her career. She's just around these kinds of people a lot, and there's a lot of patriarchal and misogynistic kinds of things that happen, and she's working through that so that she can manage it a lot better. So
Oh, no, that's awesome because it's so possible. And I think just even knowing that it's possible is empowering rather than saying I'm kind of stuck and I have to suck it up and deal with it. And no, you can stay and still have a different experience.
exactly,
Mm.
100%. Well, thank you so much for being my friend and
Aw.
being on my podcast. And please go out and find Raisa and consume her content and listen to her podcast and reach out to her if you have any questions or you need support.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, it's Allison. Thank you so much for listening to my interview with Raisa. And what I wanted to mention here really quickly before everything is finally wrapped up is that I'm still offering my 20-minute free chats. And these 20-minute free chats can be used for anything. So if you have questions about human design, if you are struggling with something in your personal life and you just need someone to listen, if you just want to create a connection with me or find a way that we can collaborate, really, I'm open to anything. So these free chats are really helpful to me as well because I get to know you and I can help you and connect you with other people who I know if that's necessary, things like that. So I do these because they have often resulted in a lot of insight and revelation for me. And at the same time, they can be really helpful to you too. I'm not selling anything on these 20-minute chats. I do have a separate call for my sales calls. So if you're interested in working with me in my one-on-one program, then you would want to schedule a 30-minute consultation. If you just want to chat for 20 minutes, then you can schedule that too. So I hope this episode has been enlightening and helpful. And you know how to reach me if you have any questions. Instagram, Allison K. Dagny, or Facebook, or you can email me at allison@whentearsleavescars.com. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time.